wake up on a cold stone floor. You don't know how long you've been unconscious. You don't know what day it is. The last thing you remember is being pulled from your cell in Lubyanka, the NKVD's most feared prison in the heart of Moscow, and told you were being transferred. You were not transferred. The room you're in now is smaller than your cell. 5 doors, each sealed from the outside, each with a small peephole at eye level. A single chair bolted to the floor. A drain in the center of the concrete. The smell of something chemical, faint, almost sweet, that you can't quite place. You are not alone in this room. Through the wall, you can hear breathing. A door opens. A man enters in a white coat. He has the hollow cheeks of a man who does not eat well and the eyes of a man who does not sleep badly. He introduces himself as a doctor. He tells you this is a medical examination. He asks about your health, your appetite, your sleep, any chest pain. He speaks with genuine concern. His voice is calm. His hands are steady. You have been in Soviet custody long enough to know that calm hands are the most dangerous kind. He rolls up your sleeve. You feel the needle. You feel nothing unusual. No burning, no rush of warmth. Just the small pressure of an injection. And then the white coat is gone, and the door is sealed again, and you are alone. You don't know what just entered your bloodstream. You won't know for days, and by then, it will already be too late to matter. This is the camera. In Russian, the word means simply the chamber. But inside the Soviet secret services, it meant something specific. A laboratory hidden within the basement of Lubyanka, Stalin's most feared building, in the center of Moscow, where condemned prisoners were brought under the pretense of medical care and injected with substances that the Soviet Union's most gifted biochemists had spent years perfecting. The man in the white coat is Grigory Maranovsky. He holds a PhD in biochemistry. His classified doctoral thesis, defended in 1940, is entitled Biological Activity of the Products of Interaction of Mustard Gas with Human Skin Tissues. His subjects provided the data for that thesis. They were not volunteers. The camera was not a rogue operation. It was not a scientist acting alone. It was authorized at the highest level of the Soviet state. NKVD Chief Lavrentiy Beria personally approved the program. After Stalin's death, when Beria himself was arrested and facing execution, he was asked about it directly. His answer, preserved in Soviet archives, was, "I gave orders to Maranovsky to conduct experiments on people sentenced to the highest measure of punishment. But it was not my idea." Not my idea. The man who approved the murder of hundreds of prisoners by poison injection said it was not his idea. No one ever established whose idea it was. Stalin was dead. The archive was classified. The prisoners were dead. You are one of the very few who is not. You sit in the chair in the chamber and you wait. You don't know why you're still alive. You don't know what makes you different from the men who came before you. You don't know that in this room, the answer to that question changes every day, depending on what Maranovsky needs to know next. Today, he needs to know how long a healthy man can resist C2. You are healthy. You are about to find out the answer. The camera was established in 1921, the year of Lenin's first stroke, on direct orders from the founders of the Soviet secret state. Its original purpose was simple: develop poisons that killed without leaving traces. The Soviet Union had enemies. Those enemies needed to die. But a bullet left a bullet. A noose left bruising. The state needed something cleaner, something that looked like a heart attack, a sudden illness, a natural death that required no explanation and permitted no investigation. Over the next 3 decades, the laboratory would develop more than 100 specialized compounds. Tasteless, odorless, colorless. Each one calibrated to produce a specific result at a specific dose in a specific time frame. And each one tested on real people, in real time, in the chamber beneath Lubyanka. Maranovsky ran the laboratory from 1938 to 1946. He was methodical. He kept detailed records. He published his findings in classified journals that circulated only within the Soviet security apparatus. but published nonetheless. He was, by every measure, a productive scientist. His subjects were called Tichki, birdies. They were selected from the condemned population of Soviet prisons, men and women already sentenced to death, already considered enemies of the people, already erased from the official record. Marinovsky brought them to the laboratory under the pretense of medical examination. A doctor would enter. Questions would be asked about health. An injection would be administered. The prisoner believed they were receiving treatment. They were receiving the experiment. Military prosecutor Colonel Vladimir Bobrionev, who gained access to Marinovsky's investigation files in the KGB archive, described what he found. Almost every day, a few prisoners condemned to death were brought to the laboratory. The whole procedure was similar to a medical examination. The doctor asked the patient about his or her health with concern, gave some advice and medication. Some died in 3 to 4 days. Others were racked with pain for a week. Marinovsky recorded everything. You feel the first symptoms 48 hours after the injection. Not pain, not immediately. Something subtler. A heaviness behind your eyes. A slight difficulty tracking the peephole as the guard shifts position outside. Your hands, when you hold them in front of your face, seem slightly wrong, as if the distance between them and your eyes has changed. You have been given C2. C2 was Marinovsky's masterwork, a compound developed after years of iterative testing on the prisoners before you. According to witness testimony preserved in declassified Soviet documents, the victim changed physically, became shorter, weakened quickly, became calm and silent, and died within 15 minutes of the full dose. You have not received the full dose. Marinovsky is calibrating. You are the calibration. You are not the first person from outside the Soviet Union to end up in this room. In the summer of 1947, a man named Cy Oggins was brought to the camera. Oggins was American. He had been born in Connecticut, educated at Columbia University, and in the 1920s had become a communist and a Soviet intelligence asset, a true believer who had dedicated his life to the cause. He had traveled the world on Soviet assignments, living under false identities, moving money and documents across borders for the NKVD. In 1939, during Stalin's Great Purge, he was arrested in Moscow on charges of anti-Soviet propaganda. He was sentenced to 8 years in the Gulag. He served them. He survived them. He wrote to American authorities asking for help. The Americans tried to secure his release. The Soviets had a problem. Oggins knew too much. He had seen the operations. He knew the handlers. He knew things that, if he returned to America and was debriefed, would cause serious damage to Soviet intelligence networks. The solution was Marinovsky. On a summer day in 1947, Cy Oggins was brought to Laboratory Number 1 and injected with curare. Curare is a paralyzing agent derived from South American plants, traditionally used on poisoned arrows by indigenous hunters. It works by blocking the nerve signals that control muscle movement. The muscles stop responding. The diaphragm stops moving. Breathing stops. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to kill. Oggins was conscious for those 10 to 15 minutes. Paralyzed. Unable to move. Unable to speak. Unable to do anything except experience what was happening to him in complete, helpless silence. His wife, Nirma, was still alive in America. She did not know where her husband was. She had been writing letters to Soviet authorities for years asking for information. She would continue writing for years after this day. She never received a truthful answer. She was told he had died in the Gulag of natural causes. The Americans found out the truth in the 1990s, when Soviet archives were partially opened after the collapse of the USSR. Oggins' case became one of the most documented examples of the camera's operations. An American citizen killed by a Soviet biochemist in a secret laboratory in Moscow while his government was attempting to negotiate his release. You think about Oggins while you sit in the chair. You have heard stories. Everyone in Lubyanka has heard stories. The prisoners talk through the walls in code when the guards are not listening. They talk about the men who go to the medical wing and do not come back. They talk about what the doctors here are really doing. You did not believe the stories. You believe them now. The difference between you and Oggins is not courage, it is not intelligence. It is chemistry. Marinovsky needs to understand how a specific compound behaves in a specific body, at a specific dose over a specific period of time. And he needs a body that survives the experiment long enough to provide useful data. You are that body today. Tomorrow you might not be. Mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, curare, cyanide derivatives, aconitine, thallium, phosgene. These are the substances Marinovsky and his colleagues tested in the camera. Each one administered to prisoners of varying ages, health conditions, and body weights. Each one documented in detail: onset time, symptom progression, time of death, post-mortem findings. The goal was always the same: a poison that killed efficiently, produced symptoms that mimicked natural illness, and left no detectable trace in a standard autopsy. The compound they called C2 was the closest they ever came to perfection. According to testimony preserved in declassified accounts, a subject who received C2 became physically smaller, the muscles contracting as the compound progressed through the body. They became quiet, calm, as if sedated, and then, within 15 minutes of the full dose, they died. Cardiac arrest, undetectable, indistinguishable from a natural death. The Soviet Union used this knowledge for decades. In September 1978, a Bulgarian dissident named Georgy Markov was standing at a bus stop on Waterloo Bridge in London. He felt a sharp sting in the back of his thigh. He turned around. A man with an umbrella was walking away. 3 days later, Markov was dead. The autopsy found a small platinum pellet, the size of a pinhead, embedded in his thigh. The pellet had been hollowed out and filled with ricin. The poison had been developed and refined in Marinovsky's laboratory 30 years earlier. The pellet had been fired from a specially modified umbrella. The assassination had been carried out by Bulgarian state security with technical assistance from the KGB, the direct institutional descendant of the NKVD that had operated the camera. The laboratory that began in 1921 testing poisons on condemned Soviet prisoners was, by 1978, assassinating journalists on London bridges. In 2018, it was used against Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, England, a Novichok nerve agent applied to a door handle. In 2020, it was used against Alexei Navalny, Novichok applied to his underwear. Navalny survived that attempt. He died in a Russian prison in 2024. The laboratory that Marinovsky built is still running. You are not thinking about London or Salisbury or 2020. You are thinking about the drain in the center of the floor and what it was installed to handle. On the third day, a second doctor enters. He is younger than Marinovsky. He does not ask about your health. He does not perform an examination. He simply observes you, checks your pupils, measures your grip strength, notes something on his clipboard, and leaves. You understand what this means. You are being measured, compared to a baseline. The experiment is progressing exactly as intended. What you do not yet know is that the man who survived this room, the only documented prisoner who left the camera alive, and eventually told the world what happened inside it, survived not because of anything he did. He survived because the Soviet Union needed a witness. And witnesses, in Stalin's world, were only kept alive for exactly as long as they were useful. The man who eventually told the world about the camera was Pavel Sudoplatov. Sudoplatov was not a prisoner. He was the opposite. He was the NKVD officer who supervised Marinovsky's work, who approved each operation, signed off on each assignment, and personally oversaw some of the most sensitive assassinations the Soviet state ever carried out. He organized the assault on Leon Trotsky's villa in Mexico. He was present for operations across Europe and Asia. He was, for decades, one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the Soviet intelligence apparatus. After Stalin's death, Sudoplatov was arrested. He spent 15 years in Vladimir prison. When he was released, he was a broken man. He wrote his memoirs, a book called Special Tasks, published in the West in 1994. In it, he described the camera in detail. He named Myranovsky. He described the prisoners. He described the procedures. He described the specific assassinations the laboratory had supported, including the killing of Sy Augens. Sudoplatov did not describe these things with remorse. He described them as a professional describing his work, the emotional register of a man accounting for a career. But the facts were there, in print, in the West, for the first time. Myranovsky himself was arrested in 1951, not for what he had done to the prisoners, but as a pawn in a political power struggle between Stalin and his security chiefs. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, not for murder, not for human experimentation, for possession of illegal substances. He spent those years in Vladimir prison, the same prison where Sudoplatov would later serve his sentence. He wrote letters to Beria and to Soviet medical authorities from his cell, demanding recognition for his scientific contributions. He argued that the work he had done deserved a Stalin Prize. He received no response. He died in 1964, in obscurity, in a country that had used him and then discarded him. In prison, when a female doctor approached him with a syringe to administer medical treatment, Myranovsky cried out, "Do not come up to me!" The man who had spent his career injecting prisoners with poisons, who had spent years perfecting the technique of the disguised medical execution, was terrified of a needle. You think about this as the days pass in the chamber. You think about what it means that the man doing this to you, the man who enters in the white coat and asks about your health and rolls up your sleeve. You think about what happens to him eventually, whether the machine that uses people eventually uses him too. The history says yes. The history says the Soviet state consumed everyone who worked for it. The scientists, the security chiefs, the generals, the true believers. Stalin killed the men who killed for him. The regime ate its own instruments, but that knowledge does not help you today. In the chamber, with the drain in the floor and the peephole in the door and the needle and the slow accumulation of something in your blood that you cannot name and cannot stop and cannot reverse, you are still here. You are still breathing. For now, that is enough. But the door is about to open again. The camera operated from 1921 to at least the 1960s. According to declassified fragments and historian analyses, it was reactivated in the late 1990s. Several laboratories of the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the direct successor to the KGB, are currently responsible, according to Western intelligence assessments, for the creation of biological and toxin weapons for clandestine operations in the West. The Lubyanka building still stands. It is still used by the FSB, Russia's Internal Security Service, another KGB successor. The basement still exists. What happens in it now is not publicly known. Georgy Markov was killed in 1978. Alexander Litvinenko was killed with polonium-210 in London in 2006. Sergei Skripal was almost killed in Salisbury in 2018. Alexei Navalny was almost killed in 2020 and then died in prison in 2024. Each poisoning used a different agent, each one more sophisticated than the last. Each one bearing the fingerprints of a laboratory that has had 100 years to perfect its methods. What began in 1921 with condemned prisoners in a basement in Moscow is still happening. The prisoners are different now. The poisons are different. The technology is different. The logic is identical. You wake up on a cold stone floor. This is how the story begins. This is also how it ends for most of the people who entered the camera. They woke up. They were examined. They were injected. They died. The Soviet Union is gone. The NKVD is gone. Myranovsky is gone. Stalin is gone. The laboratory is not gone. The next time a Russian dissident collapses in an airport, or a journalist dies of a mysterious illness before testifying, or a foreign leader develops an inexplicable cardiac event after a meeting in Moscow, you will know what to look for. A white coat, a calm voice, a question about your health, and a needle. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.